I'm Sara Goldvine, and this is Let's Talk Housing, a podcast by BC Housing. In this space, we explore the complex systemic issues that make it challenging for many people in British Columbia to access and afford a home. The provincial government has an ambitious plan with the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with helping deliver on this plan is BC Housing, which is working with hundreds of partners to develop, manage, and administer a wide range of affordable housing and homelessness services in hundreds of communities across the province. In this podcast, you'll hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. I'm Sara Goldvine. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are recording today's episode from the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We offer our respect to their peoples, past and present. Also, in full disclosure, we are recording this episode in August of 2022, and our conversations reflect the priorities of that time. For generations, people have arrived in what is now known as British Columbia from around the world, coming to these lands that have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. In 2021, British Columbia had the highest number of new residents in a generation since 1961. As BC welcomes these newcomers, it does so amid an ongoing and acute housing affordability crisis throughout the province. To discuss these matters, today we're joined by Chris Friesen, someone who knows a lot about the challenges of affordable housing for newcomers. Chris is the Chief Operating Officer of Immigrant Services Society of British Columbia. ISS of BC is a nonprofit organization that provides a variety of support services for immigrants and refugees to help them get settled, find careers, and learn what they need to know about starting their lives in Canada. Chris, welcome to Let's Talk Housing.
Thank you.
Now, to help set the context for today's conversation, I'd like us to hear from Fazel. Fazel is one of the 100,000 people who moved to British Columbia in 2021. He arrived in Vancouver from Afghanistan, where he had worked with Canadians as part of the response there. And he came here along with his family. And he said he was taken by surprise by Vancouver's housing situation. And he was really fortunate to find some housing. We're going to play the clip now.
I didn't know about the BC housing and the price of house in here, the rental price. I didn't know anything about these things. I didn't know how much 3-bedroom is, 2-bedroom. I didn't know about these things. So the case manager, he tried his best for everybody. And the people who were lucky or who fit in a 3-bedroom, like we are 6 people. It's fit for a 3-bedroom. So we fit in here. And at the same time, I'm very thankful from the case manager. Yeah, because we didn't know anybody in here to help us. We just come in a place that we didn't know anyone. One day he said that today I applied for BC Housing. I didn't know what this BC Housing means. I asked him what this BC Housing means. He said it's governmental housing and you will pay lower than the other housing. It helps us a lot. Yeah, we saved some money. Everybody knows this. We expend the extra money on the children for the school and for clothing. Now we take care of the kids very well, and we take care of ourselves also. We are very happy and we are lucky.
Now, Chris, we've just heard Fazel talk about how he found housing and how that's helped him and his family. Can you tell us a little bit, when you heard that story and you heard Fazel's story, how does that resonate with you and how common is that experience for refugees and immigrants who come to you at ISS?
It is very common. Fazel's story is not unique at all. hundreds, thousands of those stories over the past many years. I've been in this sector now for close to 30 years, and that is a reoccurring common theme. The challenge of locating housing, securing housing has gotten a lot worse over the past number of years. And the ability to find affordable housing is one of our greatest challenges. How does that play out? It means that we have to provide transitional housing for a lot longer than we did 15, 20 years ago. That means that people are staying in hotels or in our building for upwards of, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or even longer before we're able to secure housing. So it is the most difficult challenge that we are going to have to confront.
Yeah, so it sounds like certainly things have changed a lot, as you mentioned there. What are some of the specific challenges and concerns for people when they're new to Canada and ISS is working with them to help them find a home?
Well, first we have to understand the context of overall humanitarian immigration is growing. So the number of people that are being resettled to Canada, to BC, whether that's government-assisted refugees, privately sponsored, or those seeking asylum as refugee claimants, those numbers are increasing. We have to understand that for government-assisted refugees or privately sponsored, the funding that either a sponsor or the Government of Canada provides is the equivalent of income support that is offered to low-income British Columbian residents. So that means that, at the moment, shelter allowance for a single person is around $375. For a family of 4, $700. Family of 6, $785. Those really highlight, the challenges that we are confronted with. How do you find housing at that level of shelter allowance? What it means is that more and more families are having to utilize things like their child tax benefits to augment their housing. So housing is the most expensive, and so for many refugee newcomers, they're having to utilize other sources of income that they are able to avail in order to secure housing. For the lucky few, they may end up in BC housing, but that is the lucky few, given the current wait list that is in place for those trying to access BC social housing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there $780 for a family of 6. I would expect that many of our listeners would be very shocked by that figure. How does your team work with immigrants and refugees to help them find housing options, given those constraints?
So again, there is a reality that sets in usually within the first week in Canada for those, because you have to understand, coming to Canada is almost like being reborn. You have no familiarity. You likely will not have any friends or family. You arrive here alone. All your perceptions of what Canada is are through perhaps TV shows or, friends of friends, acquaintances that have, shared. The reality is that although they are absolutely grateful to be given the opportunity to rebuild their lives in this country, they face some profound challenges as part of their settlement and integration. There is a team of people at ISS of BC, particularly working with the government-assisted refugees. That would include the most recent humanitarian operation that we're leading in BC, the Afghan Special Initiative. And that includes caseworkers, housing search workers. So we have a team of housing search workers that their only job is securing permanent housing through a variety of means, social media, Craigslist, liaising with property management companies, connections to previous landlords, etc. there is not one specific path. It is a multi-pronged approach. With that realization that even though the shelter allowance rates are what they are, it is that realization that you're going to have to use portion of your child tax benefit. Upwards of 75% of some people are having to use their basic income support just to secure housing. And this has a huge impact for the family. That this puts added pressure on, things like older teenagers to work and able to help their family, as their parents perhaps are still learning English or working and learning English at the same time. So it's complex and sometimes overwhelming. But it is underlining that profound sense of gratitude that they're out of the situation, out of danger, and they can begin to look at the future through their eyes of their children and the next generation that will have far, far more opportunities than they would have if they remained in their country of asylum.
Yeah, and you've touched there on employment and really how ISS provides a lot more than housing connections. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about, in particular, how your organization works to support refugees and immigrants with language skills and help connect them with employment opportunities. Right now we know, of course, that in BC, we're expecting more than 1 million job openings in the next decade. So there's a lot of positions available. How do you help connect people with the skills that they need to access those employment opportunities?
Yep, not unlike other immigrant serving agencies or sister agencies within the sector. We are funded by both the federal and provincial government for a range of employment services, service interventions to help newcomers be able to update their resume, understand their skill transferability in the BC context. We have employer relations specialists that are working directly with employers to help facilitate opportunities for newcomers to apply for work. Job fairs that are being organized or participated in with certain employers. So again, it's a multi-pronged approach. I think, when we go back to housing, I like to go up to about, 40,000 feet. Canada at this stage, we have an aging population. We have a declining birth rate, and we have this massive skilled and unskilled labor market shortage. Our unemployment rate is the lowest in decades. We are projected to bring in the highest number of immigrants on record in the coming years, both permanent residents and temporary residents. And that includes, humanitarian immigrants, refugees. I think one of the biggest things that's missing, or a couple of things that are missing, is the connection between Canada's multi-year immigration levels plan and that connection to housing. There's a disconnect. So what I mean by that is that economists, the private sector, really have the ear of the government of Canada, the immigration minister, desperate for employees. But what is missing is the connection to housing. How are we going to provide the necessary housing for the increased numbers of immigrants that are coming to this country? It's the same thing in the British Columbia context. Immigration is a shared jurisdiction between the government of Canada and the province of BC in this context. I think we also need a long-term BC government-focused immigration plan. We need to be able to project what the numbers are going to be, and based on previous settlement patterns, be able to understand where projected increased immigration is going to settle in the province. I think these planning tools are going to be more and more critically important, because with immigration and the pressure of housing, a lot of other things come into play. And I don't think we have all the dots connected around the ability to do longer term planning. And what I mean by that, it's about transit. It's about healthcare. It's about education. So it is a multi-pronged, long-term plan that is needed so that we as a society are able to undertake more long-term planning for this anticipated, accelerated arrival of immigrants coming from abroad.
I mean, I think there's so much there, and I think that you've really highlighted the importance of considering how housing is connected to other elements of community, including transit and healthcare, education, especially for families. Do you, from the work that you do, what are the types of unique needs that you would say are really important to keep in mind when we consider what type of housing immigrants and refugees need when they come to our community? How's that different? Or maybe it's not.
I think I would start by saying, we know that the province of BC is investing considerably in building rental accommodation and social and some additional social housing projects in different parts of the province. That's a good thing. I think what's missing from that existing plan was a focus or a lens or a section that spoke to the need to respond to higher immigration levels. So that takes me to your question. What's unique? What's different when it comes to immigrants and refugees, particularly around refugees? From our perspective and vantage point, one of the biggest challenges we have is larger size families, larger than the Canadian average size families. So they may be immediate or extended families. So where you have 4, 5, 6 children, we desperately need children. So that's an investment in our future. But when it comes to housing, the challenges of finding housing and the limitations within the BC housing stock, it precludes the ability to support larger size families. And so I go full circle. I think we're at a stage now, and this has been, some initial work that has been undertaken between the sector and not-for-profit housing, is I think it's now time to develop a provincial refugee housing strategy. We're all trying to do our best to help new families settle and secure housing. But the volume, the increased number, and the lack of affordable housing means that we really have to reconsider all that we're doing. And I think part of that is the development of a provincial refugee housing strategy, because we don't want to compete with the limited shelter beds. We don't want to compete with the existing housing stock and the lack of that. We need to be able to articulate, and this is where that long-term planning document, that immigration plan, the projections of the numbers of people and where they're likely to settle. We need an all-of-government approach on this. And we need to better understand, looking, not 1 year out or 2 years out, but 5 to 10 years out. How is this province going to be transformed as a result of immigration, including humanitarian immigration? And how can we better prepare for that eventuality? What do we need to do now? Because as we all know, housing takes years. So we need to be able to forecast, project, and build that capacity, and now as the numbers continue to increase.
When you think about some of these people that your organization is able to help now and in the future, we're talking about people that often come here because they may have been at risk of or experienced violence and marginalization in their previous countries. And, that's true for many folks who are arriving here now. And it's also true for many of us whose ancestors arrived here. when you're working with these newcomers, what does that, how do you make people feel welcome, and how does that work for you and folks in ISS?
Yeah, I think, I go back to that notion of gratitude there, and the triumph of the human spirit. Many of these individuals have faced atrocities that are beyond the average Canadian's imagination. They're looking for a listening ear. Some are looking for more formal help, clinical intervention, survivors of torture, etc. What is unique about the ISS of BC, the Welcome Center building, is the fact we cracked a nut in 2016 when, for the first time in the world, this facility has not been replicated yet. It's been studied by over 37 different countries. But what we were able to do is bring together through a social purpose lens, a shared location lens, shared space lens, is bring together a number of private sector and not-for-profit colleagues all together under one roof, and provide that level of wraparound support for the common client. It challenged us to get out of our silos and look at the client more holistically, leveraging through co-location tenants within the building under one roof, how we could better support and accelerate the settlement and integration process. And this is ongoing. We are driven by curiosity and piloting and evaluating, and this will not change. But we think that we have a pretty cool model that really helps immigrants and refugees get that step up as they settle in this country. Everyone will tell us that all they want to do is give back. The opportunity to have come to this country, whether they chose to as immigrants or had to through refugees, they want to contribute. They want to give back. They want to work. They want to pay taxes. They want to be involved in the community. So much of our work is in phases, related to getting started, helping with acquiring the necessary language skills, looking at the employment, whether that is self-employment or just, entering the labor market. And finally, citizenship. We are one of, only a few countries that has a linear pathway for new immigrants and refugees with permanent resident status to be able to acquire full citizenship. That is a goal, particularly for our refugee newcomers. They see that as a significant milestone of building home in their new homeland, Canada.
You talked about how important it is for folks to be able to give back. So maybe we can wrap here with this last question. How do you think that having that stable and affordable home will help Fazel and his family be able to get to that place where they can give back? And they already are. But how does that make it different for them?
Yes, that's the most important milestone, is obtaining that first, permanent secured housing. The settlement process cannot fully begin until you have secured housing. You cannot register your children in school if you don't have a permanent address. You cannot start a job unless you have a permanent address. If your housing is not addressed, so much of the settlement process cannot begin, and is in fact then delayed. So that's why housing is so important. That's why, for those that are joining us as future citizens of this country, that's why it's so important for all of us, not only, and I'm not suggesting in any way to give priority to immigrants and refugees over low-income Canadians or BC residents. But what I'm saying is that when we're looking at housing policy, housing strategy, when we're looking at Canada's immigration levels plan, it's now time to start connecting that with how are we going to address the housing needs of the individuals that we're inviting to come to this country, either as immigrants or refugees, so that they can fully reach their potential and be able to contribute back to Canadian society as quickly as possible. Ultimately, this is about nation building, and our ability to help them will help us as a society.
Really, really wonderful place for us to wrap today. Thank you, Chris, for joining us on the podcast. And my thanks as well to Fazel for sharing his story. Let's talk again soon. To learn more about BC Housing or to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit our website at bchousing.org.